Got it. Oh, okay. It's working, so whatever. There we go. All right. Good evening. I was wondering. Okay, so last reading from the Hollow Earth Enigma. We are finishing it up tonight. And I've already got the next book queued up. I have been saying I would read The Republic. It's a lot longer than I realized, but that's okay. I'm going to read it anyway. That'll be the next thing I do. That'll be starting Tuesday. But for now, we're going to finish up the Hollow Earth Enigma. We have 2 chapters and a 1-page epilogue. So, get into it here. Chapter 11, The Intraterrestrials. Reinhold Schmidt was a quietly spoken, rather self-effacing man who lived in an apartment block on Franklin Avenue in what is known as the Hollywood Flats district of Los Angeles. In 1958, he made headline news with a story more startling than any publicist in the film industry could probably have dreamed up. Ugh, sorry. For Schmidt told the press, radio, and television that he had been taken in a UFO on a journey to the Arctic and met a group of men and women who lived, he said, somewhere beneath the North Pole. While several of the early champions of the Hollow Earth concept, including Halley, Mather, and Sims, believed the inner world was uninhabited and offered mankind the prospect of a vast new area to colonize, a number of others had claimed that it is occupied and that these subterranean people, the intraterrestrials, may well have been there for centuries. As O.C. Hugenin wrote in an article, The Subterranean World, in the July 1965 issue of Fate magazine, quote, "The idea of the existence of a subterranean world will shock many people. To others it will sound impossible, for certainly, they will say, if it existed it would have been discovered long ago. But not necessarily so. There may well be good reasons why some antediluvian race, which came from the submerged continents of Lemuria or Atlantis, and developed a civilization far beyond ours, would wish to keep their existence a secret." End quote. Reinhold Schmidt's contact is therefore of especial interest because of its comparatively recent date and because it provides further evidence of the origins of UFOs. It was in August 1958 that he first told an LA newspaper about his journey and afterwards repeated the story for the rest of the media and the ufologists who came to talk to him. Schmidt never refused an interview and convinced everyone he spoke to of his sincerity. One of them, reporter Charles Longcroft of the Los Angeles Examiner, wrote later, quote, "This was the first time I have ever been face to face with someone who claims to have contacted spacemen or to have been inside a saucer. My impression is that the man has definitely seen something and is not making the whole story up as a publicity stunt." End quote. The facts about Reinhold Schmidt and his journey to the North Pole are these. He was born in 1920 in Hamburg, from which his parents fled after Hitler's rise to power. The whole family came to California and were granted U.S. citizenship. Reinhold was educated in Los Angeles and followed his father into a small office supply business in the city. He became interested in stories of UFOs, he said, after reading Frank Scully's groundbreaking book Behind the Flying Saucers in 1950, but never expected to see one himself. All that changed for him during a few days in August 1958, as he told UFO Report. Quote, "I had what I thought was a dream telling me to go to a quarry in Bakersfield. In fact, I learned later it was a message from the space people. On August 14, I drove my Buick to the quarry, and after sitting around for several hours, this circular silver craft came down from the sky. It seemed to be made of something like aluminum, and access to it was by sliding doors and a ramp that was lowered to the ground. A figure appeared at the doorway carrying some kind of torch in its hand. This was flashed on me, and I and it paralyzed my physical movements for a minute or two without impairing my ability to think or talk. The figure with the torch was then, by the way, that's the European word for flashlight, torch, just in case you hadn't picked that up. Um, the figure with the torch was then joined by two others. They came down the ramp, and I suddenly found I could move again. They escorted me into the craft. Rather than leave my car in the quarry, one of the people indicated I could take it in the machine, and it was driven up the ramp and brought on board. We then took off and flew north towards Alaska, and after that up to the Arctic and over the polar regions. End quote. The few of the craft the crew of the craft consisted of 4 men and 2 females, Schmidt said. They were all tall, with noble features, and dressed in gray one-piece, skin-tight costumes. The women were especially pretty, in the classical style he always associated with paintings of the ancient Greeks and Romans. They spoke to each other in what he recognized as High German, because he had been taught the language by his parents. Throughout the entire journey, however, he was always addressed in very precise English. Okay, it looks like there's more of a quote. Quote, what was remarkable about the spacecraft was that from the inside, the whole of the hull appeared to be transparent, and it was possible to see out from anywhere except those sections that were obscured by machinery or control panels. There were couches, chairs, and small tables, and although they did not appear to be fixed to the floor, they never moved, even when the craft made the most complex and high-speed maneuvers. I was able to see all the journey up to the Arctic Circle. When we got there, we seemed to go under the Arctic Ocean and enter a huge hole. I was conscious of passing over a strange landscape, though we never actually landed. End quote. Reinhold Schmidt said that his hosts never told him precisely where they came from, although he became increasingly convinced their homeland must be somewhere in the region of the pole. It was evident from the flying machine that they had a highly mechanized society, and from their manner he guessed they enjoyed comfortable and peaceful lives. If their mission had a purpose, he felt it was to observe mankind and stop us from destroying the planet. Schmidt's voyage lasted for 5 days, during which he slept several times. He remembered having the sensation of seeing a land not unlike the Earth, which was lit by a glowing sun rather different from our sun. He also twice had the impression of crossing a large curve of ocean when the horizon dipped and fell and then righted itself. On 18 August he was returned to California and once again found himself in the Bakersfield quarry with the Buick beside him. As he stood watching the spacecraft disappear rapidly northwards, he was suddenly aware that he had an unexpected souvenir of the journey that might help him convince people of the truth of the extraordinary events he had experienced, for he noticed that the paintwork on the upper surfaces of his car had been turned luminous. Several of the very earliest legends of the Hollow Earth claim that it is inhabited by variously giants, demonic creatures, the little people, and a wise, peaceable humanoid race like that encountered by Reinhold Schmidt. Some researchers believe it may be occupied by the survivors of Lemuria and Atlantis, who fled there to escape the deluge which overwhelmed their continents. There's another group who claim the intraterrestrials are the self-same people spoken about with awe in several of the oldest mythologies. They cite the ancient tales of certain humans being guided by godlike creatures, in particular the ancient Greeks and Romans, who developed an entire theology based on such beings and believed these gods and goddesses were actually emissaries from the inner world. Historian William F. Warren has commented significantly on this in his book Paradise Found, 1953. Quote, many ancient texts and manuscripts make reference to the underworld as a real and genuine dwelling place. I am of the opinion that religions have failed regarding their teaching of a hell below because a deep scrutiny of the text tells more of a paradise than a burning abyss. End quote. The first book to speculate at length on who or what the intraterrestrials might be was by a Scandinavian intellectual at Copenhagen University, Professor Ludwig Holberg, 1684 to 1754. Written in Latin and published in 1741, it was called, oh God, I know I'm gonna butcher this. I'm gonna read it anyway. Nikolai Clemai. I don't know what a double I is in Latin. Iter subterraneum novum tellus theorium as historium quinte monarchia advic nobis incognite. Sorry about that. I've never studied Latin. Which means the journey of Niles Klim. No, it would be climb to the world underground. Holberg, who was born in Bergen, Norway, studied in Denmark before becoming a professor at the university, first of philosophy and history, and later of metaphysics and Latin rhetoric. A brilliant and inquisitive scholar, he was inspired to write the book because of a lifelong interest in the curious legends which proliferated in his native Norway about a subterranean world. Holberg's book tells the story of a man who, while exploring a mountain, accidentally finds his way into the hollow earth. Here he discovers a central sun circled by a tiny planet, Nazar, and on the concave shell lives a curious race of intelligent beings. Unlike the world he has just left, however, Niles Climb, learns that the females are the dominant sex, and by confining the male population to the most basic tasks, they have created a utopia of peace and harmony. A map of Holberg's idea of the hollow earth is reproduced here. And so we have our first picture of these chapters. So let me show you that here real quick. Not much of a map, really. Norvegia. What does this one say? Martinia. I can't quite make that one out. Or that one. Can't read upside down very well. Um, Sol Subterraneous. And something Nazar. So I'm assuming that's something, the word for planet, but I don't know. Anyway, yeah, not a whole lot of detail there, but it'll work. Okay, the hollow earth as imagined by Professor Ludwig Holberg of Copenhagen University. It is perhaps, and that's the caption. Sorry. It is perhaps not surprising that Holberg chose to write his book in Latin because it was swiftly denounced in Denmark as dangerously radical and was subjected to probably the first attempt to suppress a hollow earth theory. Although an English translation was published the following year, it was to be almost half a century and long after the author's death before a popular edition in Danish appeared. Holberg's book may well have inspired an English lawyer, Robert Paltock, 1698 to 1767, to ponder on the possibility of a hollow earth and who might live there. In any event, in 1751, Paltock published his own contribution to the theory, a two-volume work with a title that is so self-explanatory as to make reading it almost unnecessary. This is a very long, very 17th or 18th century title. So here we go. The life and adventures of Peter Wilkins, a Cornish man, relating particularly his shipwreck near the South Pole, his wonderful passage through a subterraneous cavern into a world of new into a kind of new world, his meeting there with a Gauri or flying woman whose life he preserved, and afterwards married her, his extraordinary conveyance to the country of glums and gowries, or men and women that fly. Likewise, a description of this strange country with the laws, customs, and manners of its inhabitants, and the author's remarkable transactions among them. When you title something so that somebody has to take 2 breaths in the middle of the title to read it, yeah. Uh, wow. Okay. The title page also refers in similar tone to Wilkins' departure from the inner world in a flying machine, shades of UFO here, his rescue by a ship, the Hector, and his return voyage to Plymouth, where, after recounting his story, he died in 1739. The book is embellished with a series of engravings of the Gowries, who also rule the roost in a nation where war and the evils of the outer world are unknown. The English poet Samuel Taylor Coleridge called the book, quote, a work of uncommon beauty, end quote, and used some of its ideas in his poem The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. It was probably no intention of either Holberg or Paltok that their readers should believe literally in an inner world full of dominant women or winged people, although they may have liked the idea. But the 2 books certainly helped to further discussion of the whole legend. One unlikely person to be intrigued by the notion was Giacomo Casanova, 1725 to 1798, the Italian libertine who in 1788 wrote Icosameron, a book notable for its realistic tone and excellent scientific speculation. In particular, the anticipation of electricity, thanks to the help of the intraterrestrials. In this case, the subterranean world is occupied by the megamikres, the big littles, small people who are large in spirit. They have inhabited their paradise-like world since time immemorial and are said to be without sin. Here again the book was undoubtedly making a point rather than offering a serious proposal. Less than half a century later, Captain John Cleve Symmes propounded his theory of concentric spheres, but thought it was unlikely that anyone was already living inside the Earth. According to Paul Clark in his Atlantic Monthly report, Simms's only significant comment in this respect looked to the future when human beings might be living in both dimensions. Quote, the inhabitants upon the exterior surface, Symmes declared, would be antipodes to those immediately under them upon the interior surface, as well as to those upon the opposite side of the earth, while the inhabitants of the inner world would be antipodal only to those immediately opposite them upon the outer side. That is to say, the external inhabitants would have 2 sets of antipodes, while those of the interior would have only one. End quote. Simms's whole idea did, however, inspire Simsonia, A Voyage of Discovery, by a certain Captain Adam Seaborn, which was published in 1820, complete with a, quote, sectional view of the Earth, end quote, showing the openings at both poles. And we will have a picture here in just a minute showing exactly that. In the book, Seaborn describes an expedition by sea to find an entrance to the hollow earth via the North Pole. The boat is sucked into the interior by a powerful current, and there the seafarers discover an enchanted world lit by 2 suns and a moon. It is inhabited by a race of extremely pale-skinned men and women dressed in white to demonstrate their purity. They appear quiet and gentle, but have developed a fearsome armory of weapons which they apparently intend to use to keep their world free from contamination by surface Homo sapiens. When the crew discover that the inner world is the repository of huge deposits of gold and begin casting covetous eyes upon them, they are unceremoniously ordered to leave by the all-powerful ruler of the utopian government. And now we have that picture, and it's captioned Diagram and Explanation of a Sectional View of the Earth, which appeared in Captain Adam Seaborn's book Simsonia. So let me bring that on up here for you. Sectional view of the Earth, showing the openings at the poles, North Pole, South Pole, equator. So he's got the labels here. Figure 1, which is rays of the sun when in the equator refracted 3 degrees. 2, where is 2? 2 is here. Moon's rays in 28 degrees north declination. 3 is this one here. Sun's rays in 9-degree south declination. 4 is sun's rays in 23 degrees here, and then 5 is 28 degrees. 6, sun's rays in 23 degrees 27 minutes. I think I said that right. South declination, refracted 3 degrees. 7, supposed place of Belsubia. 8, place of exile. Where's 8? 8 is right there at the edge of the hole. 9 is Simsonia, right here. 10 is Token Island, right here at the opening of the South Pole. And 11, Seaborn's Land, right here next on the outer surface of the pole. Okay. Moving on. It has been suggested that Sims himself might have been Captain Adam Seaborn, as the name is so obviously fictitious and nothing whatsoever is known about the writer. However, this is not a view that I and a number of other researchers share because of Sims's known determination that America should annex the Hollow Earth, a place he believed to be conducive to mankind and in no way hostile. In an essay, The Authorship of Simsonia, written for the New England Quarterly in June 1975, Hans Joachim Lang and Benjamin Leese opted for Nathaniel Ames, a writer of stories about the sea, while in a copy of the book held in the Library of Congress in Washington, the authorship is credited to one Jared Sparks. Some 30 years after Simsonia was published, however, 2 bona fide seamen were credited with having led expeditions to find entrances to Sims's world. A note in Isis magazine of December 1941 records, quote, Captain Wiggins, an Englishman, read a paper to the Society of Arts in John Street, Adelphi, about his voyage to a subterranean world. The explorer, after passing the 80-degree line, saw a timbered country with an abundance of animal life, and whose inhabitants spoke Hebrew and possessed a superior culture. Perhaps these were the descendants of the lost tribes of Israel, the captain said, who went up the Euphrates to the north to dwell in a land where man had never dwelt before. Around this same time, Captain Tuttle, an old United States whaling master, visited Simsonia, his account being similar to the preceding one, save that he states that every 4th winter is mild and that the land can be reached only by steam vessel. End quote. Willis George Emerson, who related Olaf Janssen's visit to the inner world in 1908, said the old man told him just before he died that the place was inhabited by a race of fair-skinned giants. The men were all 12 feet tall and the women a couple of feet shorter. Both sexes wore embroidered tunics and sandals on their feet. They were mild-tempered and dignified and lived over 500 years. According to Jansen, they also possessed a mysterious power much greater than electricity, which they used to drive their machinery and equipment. This sounds to me rather like the vril power which I discussed at length in my earlier book, The Lost World of Agarty, published in 1982. The Brazilian naval commander Paulo Strauss, see Chapter 9, takes a similar view and has his own theory about one of the great disappearance stories of this century. Quote, the subterranean people have a physical structure that resembles those on the surface, but they are much more advanced than us. Among their number are certain people who descended from the surface and decided to stay, including Colonel Percy Fawcett, the English explorer who disappeared in 1925 while exploring with his son Jack. They were not killed by Indians in the Mato Grosso, as is commonly supposed, but found an entrance to the hollow world, descended, and there remained. For years afterwards, Fawcett's wife claimed to be in telepathic touch with her husband in a subterranean world. End quote. Raymond Palmer, whose acquaintance we made in Chapter 8 in 1945, published a series of narratives in Amazing Stories, said to be based on racial memory, which maintained there was not one but two races living in the Hollow Earth. In these accounts, quote, written by Richard S. Shaver, 1907 to 1975, a Pennsylvania psychic, which commenced with, quote, I remember Lemuria, end quote, in March 1945, it was stated that the interior of the earth was inhabited by the remnants of a migration of surface dwellers who had been forced to seek shelter underground more than 12,000 years earlier, and they had become divided into two groups. One of these, the Abandoneros, shortened to Deros, were technically very advanced but evil intentioned. They had flying machines, UFOs again, and a variety of sinister machines that could be used to create an urge to kill in unsuspecting victims. It was these Deros, Shaver claimed, who were responsible for much of the evil in the world: wars, accidents, murders, and suicides. Their worst depredations were, however, sometimes thwarted by a dwindling number of highly intelligent and pacifist numbers of the original race known as the Teros. Not surprisingly, there has been a great deal of debate about these stories, often referred to as the Shaver Mystery and described by Life magazine as, quote, the most celebrated rumpus to rock the science fiction world, end quote. But all through his life, Richard Shaver said he believed implicitly in what he had written. Quote, I am no scientist, he insisted in one defense of the series, but I have studied all the scientific books I can get, only to become more and more convinced that I have remembered true things, end quote. Perhaps even more curious still is the eyewitness account by an American geologist who was among a group of scientists working in Antarctica in 1958 during International Geophysical Year. The man was conducting experiments with a colleague on the Knox coast when their visibility was suddenly obscured by a quote unquote violent whirl of white, which he knew could not be a meteorological effect. Certain there was no one else in the vicinity, the two men walked towards the whirlwind and discovered that it was caused not by snow but by a kind of hot white steam with a sharp smell which they could not define. In the middle of the cloud, as it dissolved, they saw a dome-shaped structure about 2 meters high with a diameter of about 10 meters. It was shining like glass. Although I am satisfied as to the qualifications and honesty of the two scientists in this story, I have been asked not to name them, but here, in his own words, is the statement of one of the pair. Quote, the first thing I thought of was of something unknown below the ground, perhaps of volcanic origin. Being both fascinated and frightened at the same time, I ran towards the dome. At first I thought someone had got there before me when I saw two moving figures, but immediately afterwards my blood froze, as they were not human at all, but round things, yellowish and with a height of hardly more than a meter, like balloons but clumsy on the ice and only half inflated, tottering and wheeling around. Near them, or on them, there was a light which seemed to be like an oxyacetylene lamp. A little ball seemed to explode in front of me, spreading a crackling shower of blue sparks. I started to run, as I was in a real panic. Get away, I shouted to my friend, who had stayed behind. Get away, quick! We only turned around to look when we were back in the safety of our transport. For a few moments we saw the reflections of the dome and then another white whirl. There was a reflection in the sky, but scarcely visible, and when the cloud faded there was nothing at all on the ice. End quote. Opinions are divided about precisely what the two men saw. The account suggests they may have come across a UFO which had landed on the ice, perhaps prior to entering the southern entranceway to the hollow Earth. But if that is so, the identity of the things in the machine seems to suggest extraterrestrials are more likely inhabitants than humanoids. One more report brings our history up to date. According to an article in the National Enquirer in 25 February 1992, a Danish scientist and explorer, Edmund Borch, had recently returned from leading an international team of explorers through the North Pole opening the previous summer. He had apparently found the 1,400-mile wide opening thanks to studying the ESSA 7 satellite photograph, which he mentioned a few chapters ago. The Dane told one of the newspaper reporters, quote, "There's a hole in the pole and it leads to a tropical paradise located at the center of the earth. It has its excuse me. It has its own sun, a shallow, warm water sea, and lush tropical vegetation. What's more, the land within it is inhabited by a highly advanced and very peaceful race of humans. Normally, the hole cannot be seen from the air because of the heavy cloud cover over the North Pole, and because of the inhabitants of the hollow Earth keep it covered with electronic light screens. These screens give the illusion of vast fields of ice and snow through holographic manipulation of the snow and ice surrounding the hole. Because the hole is so large, the slope down is very gradual, and any explorers are hardly aware they are entering another world." End quote. The National Enquirer added by way of a footnote, quote, "A number of other men claim to have entered the hole at the North Pole. They include William Shavers, a Navy pilot who crashed at the North Pole during World War II. A tribe of wandering Eskimos also told a Canadian reporter in 1956 that they had found a green land at the top of the world." End quote. This last sentence deserves more than just a passing reference because a number of explorers and researchers believe that Inuit are intimately connected with the Hollow Earth legend and may even have originated there. Certainly, they remain one of the most mysterious people on Earth, living in the world's most hostile environment and about whose origins no one can really be sure. Some authorities believe they are the oldest inhabitants of the northern hemisphere, existing in a region for which nature never intended human beings and into which they came by chance. The Norwegian explorer Nansen, in his book In Northern Mists, 1911, writes at some length about his experience with the Eskimos or Inuit and declares at one point, quote, "When we remember that in the efforts of the Eskimos to tell us where they came from, they would point to the north and describe a land of perpetual sunshine, it is easy to see that the Norwegians who associate the polar regions with the end of the world, certainly not with a new world, would wonder at the strange origin thus indicated. No wonder we regard them as a supernatural people who may well have come from the interior of the earth." End quote. In 1909, while Rear Admiral Robert Peary was exploring at the North Pole, he was surprised to learn that his Eskimo guides believed he was, quote, "on an expedition to find the great people to the north from which they were descended." End quote. Peary understood them to mean a paradise where the inhabitants possessed great powers. From what he was able to deduce of their religion, his Eskimos believed that after death they would descend beneath the earth where the sun never sets and the water never freezes. Quote unquote. Charles Berlitz, in his World of Strange Phenomena, tells the story of two archaeologists, Magnus Marx and Froelich Rainey, who carried out excavations at Ipiutak in June 1940. They were discovered There they discovered the ancient ruins of what they could only describe as an Arctic metropolis, quote unquote. Rows of buried stones and elaborate Eskimo carvings pointed to the fact that there had once been as many as 800 habitations extending along the shore for almost a mile, home to around 4,000 people. According to Rainey, this amounted to an incredible number of inhabitants for a hunting village in the Arctic, and he theorized, quote, the people of this Arctic metropolis brought their arts from some center of cultural advance, end quote. In his book Not of This World, Peter Colosimo points out with equal significance the Eskimos believe they were deported from regions which today are tropical by the use of, quote, huge metal birds, end quote, UFOs yet again. Another legend among them, just as current, is that some of their forefathers, now dead or, quote, carried off into the skies, end quote, returned afterwards with magical powers they never had before. He's got an end quote with no beginning quote, as though that part of that uh, paragraph was a quote, but I don't know, typo, I guess. William Reed and Marshall B. Gardner, both of whom drew heavily on the accounts of Nansen and Peary in their books, came to much the same conclusion about the origins of the Eskimos. As Theodore Fitch has noted in Our Paradise Inside the Earth, quote, both Reed and Gardner declared that there must be a land of paradise on the other side of the mammoth ice barrier. Both men were of the opinion that a race of little brown people lived in the interior of the earth. It is possible that the Eskimos descended from these people, end quote. Indeed it is. As recently as 26 April 1998, the London newspaper The Sunday Times reported, quote, a lost tribe of dark-skinned Eskimos has been discovered living on the edge of the ice fields at the North Pole, end quote. Scientists, it said, were hoping to be able to study the men and women, their lifestyle, culture, and traditions, as well as any differences between them and their paler brethren. Only time will tell if this enquiry might prove a major step along the way to solving another of the mysteries of the Hollow Earth enigma. Who, if anyone, lives there? And that is the end of that chapter. So, that leads us into the very last chapter, Chapter 12, A Universe of Hollow Worlds, with a question mark. During a research visit to the headquarters of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, in Washington, D.C., I had the opportunity to look at some of the remarkable photographs that have been taken by American spacecraft of the planets and moons in our solar system. These breathtaking color pictures, filmed in close up by the various passing probes, reveal the Moon, Mars, Venus, Jupiter, Saturn, and the other heavenly bodies not just as specks in the enormity of space, but as truly amazing worlds. The details are so clear that a viewer feels on the verge of touchdown on places that have haunted our imagination for centuries. It was while I was looking at a particularly vivid photograph of Callisto, one of the moons of Jupiter, that a startling thought occurred to me. The picture had been taken by Voyager 2 in July 1979 and showed the surface of the little moon, one of four major satellites and 12 smaller moons that orbit the most massive of all the planets in our system, sparkling with lights which appeared to be shining through holes in its surface. It seemed to be it seemed to all intents and purposes like a giant globe illuminated from the inside. The idea was electrifying. Could it too be a hollow world? I wondered, studying the moon even closer, and if this was true of Callisto, could there be others, thereby making the Earth just one of many such in the galaxy? I have since discovered that others have had similar thoughts and have come to the conclusion that we might well be living in a whole universe of hollow worlds. What might be true in the formation of one planet could surely be possible for others too. Looking for facts to substantiate this theory took me back once again to Sims, who of course used the planet Saturn as part of his argument. Sure enough, Paul Clark, the note taker at the captain's lecture, had not missed the relevant statement, although he was unfortunately brief on the matter. I quote from his Atlantic Monthly resume. Quote, Captain Sims maintained that the other planets, like the Earth, were each composed of concentric spheres, but I have not space sufficient to refer to the telescopic appearances which are noticed by him in support of his theory. End quote. Evidence suggests that Sims's son, Americus, picked up on this point too, for according to an essay, quote, The Theory of Concentric Spheres, end quote, by William Marion Miller in Isis, December 1941, quote, the younger Sims later marshaled and elaborated essentially the same facts in support of the theory. The rings of Saturn as proof of the theory of concentricity in nature are on the horns of Venus and the belt of Jupiter, end quote. When Marshall B. Gardner came to write his book, A Journey to the Earth's Interior, in the early years of this century, he went rather deeper to substantiate the idea. Quote, when we saw that the Earth when we say that the Earth is a hollow body with polar openings and an interior sun, we back up the statement by referring to nebulas in many stages of evolution in which the gradual forming of the outer envelope of the future planet and the interior sun and even the beginnings of the polar openings are all clearly visible in their different stages. When we point to the actual construction of the planets Mars, Venus, and Mercury, and we show just what the polar openings are like, we show that they are not just ice caps, because direct light has been seen to come from them, and then we demonstrate conclusively that the Earth, like Mars and the other planets, has its polar openings too. End quote. Curiously, it was to be another 50 years before any hollow Earth researcher looked heavenwards to support the concept, and when one did, the result was a court case and humiliation for the proposer of a hollow sun. Martin Gardner gives the facts in his excellent work Fads and Fallacies in the Name of Science, 1957. Quote, in 1952, a West German patent attorney, Gottfried Buren, offered 25,000 marks to anyone who could disprove his hollow sun theory. According to Buren, the sun's flaming outer shell surrounds a cool inner sphere covered with vegetation. The dark core can be glimpsed occasionally through sunspots, which are nothing more than the temporary rents in the blazing shell. The German Astronomical Society carefully ripped the theory apart, and when Buren refused to pay, the society took legal action. Incredible as it may seem, the court decided in favor of the astronomers. Buren was ordered to pay the sum he had offered, plus court costs and interest. End quote. The German's concept is certainly a difficult one to image. Much more likely is the idea that the moon could be hollow, as was first proposed in January 1970 by two Russian scientists, Mikhail and Alexandra Checherbakov. I know I'm butchering that, sorry. Of the Soviet Academy of Sciences. In an article published in Komsolskaya Pravda, the couple, where I got group, the couple rejected the three general hypotheses about the moon's origin. One, that it was a piece of the Earth that had been torn away. Two, that it had been formed independently from the same cloud of gas and dust. And three, that it had wandered into the solar system from far away and been caught by the Earth's gravity. The Checherbakovs said that the moon's low density compared to that of the Earth suggested to them that it was actually a hollow sphere. Quote, this appears to to consist of two shells containing an atmosphere, the inner 30 kilometers thick, made of extremely hard metal, the outer about 4 kilometers thick, composed of thermoprotective, resistant, and inoxidizable rocks, including chromium, titanium, and zirconium. The larger lunar craters and their surprisingly small depths were caused by meteorites striking the metallic shock absorbers and exploding sideways, not inwards, causing extensive, shallow holes and scattering debris far and wide. End quote. What made the two Russians' theory really fascinating was their contention that the moon is actually an artificial satellite that was once launched on a geocentric orbit around the Earth by alien beings of enormous intelligence whose civilization was based on a giant spaceship. Quote, inside the hollow interior of the moon are storerooms for propulsives, tools and materials for repairs, navigational equipment, and observational instruments. Some lunar rocks are different and older than terrestrial rocks. This does not prove the moon was fabricated before Earth was formed, but it is undoubtedly extremely ancient. The satellite, now probably uninhabited, is becoming a wreck. The stabilizers no longer function. The poles are displaced, and the face opposite Earth wobbles badly. The dark Maria, or dried seas, seem to be patches of the metallic inner sphere stripped of its protective sheath, later repaired. The repair material and equipment underneath these localities explain the phenomena of mascons, zones of increased gravity discovered in eccentric orbits of our own lunar satellites. Gas, sometimes seen escaping through craters, is not due to volcanic activity but to leakage of atmosphere inside from fissures in the outer sphere. End quote. Startling as this idea must have seemed at first to many readers, it soon attracted serious attention in America, especially from the science writer Don Wilson, who published a series of essays in Fate magazine giving various examples of how strange a place the moon quite evidently was. He cited a number of curious phenomena that had been observed and measured on the surface by astronomers all around the world, including clouds of water vapor and mysterious winking lights. He drew attention to the fact that the average density of the moon was the same as lightweight aluminum and printed a new photograph of a crater at the moon's south pole, which was very much deeper than any of the others. He suggested that this just might be an entranceway to the hollow interior, very similar to those in the Arctic and Antarctic regions on Earth, and went on, quote, the seismic data from the moon is also extremely impressive. Scientists were literally falling off their chairs when it first started to come in. The analysis done by the scientists at NASA in 1962 seemed to point to only one conclusion: the moon must be hollow. In astronomy, mass is dealt with on the basis of relative masses. This being so, if the moon is hollow, then so might be the Earth and other planets and their satellites, because gravity is based on masses, relative masses, and distances. Therefore, if only one object was hollow, it would be patently different from all the rest. End quote. Subsequent study by a number of Hollow Earth researchers has produced a list of those planets and moons who's most likely to be hollow, and I propose to look at the evidence for them one at a time. They are after the Earth and the Moon: Mercury, Venus, Mars and its moon Phobos, Jupiter and its satellite Callisto, Saturn, and just possibly the two very recently discovered moons of Uranus. Mercury is, of course, the planet nearest the Sun and is believed to have the harshest environment of any world in the solar system. Its appearance is not unlike that of the Moon, with many well-defined craters and significantly an interior said to be very strongly resemble our own. end quote, according to a NASA scientist after the flypast of Mariner 10 in 1974. Mercury has a curiously weak magnetic field, which gives it an unusual axis of spin, and this is what first led to suggestions that it might be hollow. Yeah, that could make sense, but also just as a little side note, if you get metal hot enough, it like iron, if you get iron hot enough, it loses its magnetism. A magnet won't stick to it. In fact, that's something that blacksmiths use all the time when they're treating metals. Just so you know. Astronomers in the past have several times noticed a tiny bright dot on the planet during a mercurial eclipse. This caused Raymond Palmer to speculate in an article in The Hidden World, quote, if it isn't true that just at that moment the polar orifice of Mercury formed as other bodies by a vortexial action presents itself at precisely the proper position to be observed, end quote. Further discussion has followed a report in the April 1992 issue of Final Frontier on this same phenomenon. Quote, despite temperatures that can climb as high as 800 degrees Fahrenheit, the journal stated, researchers at the California Institute of Technology in Pasadena have identified what they believe is a water ice cap more than 180 miles in diameter on Mercury's north pole, end quote. I guess if it only gets up to 800 degrees, then my comment about the metal losing its magnetism isn't relevant, but still, I thought I'd point it out. Okay, Venus. Venus is often referred to as Earth's sister planet, being our closest neighbor at a distance of just 26 million miles. Space probes from both Russia and the US have penetrated the blankets of yellowish clouds which cover the planet. These prove to be almost 95% carbon dioxide, with a hint of sulfur dioxide providing the color, while traces of water vapor were also recorded. The surface of Venus is covered by vast rolling plains and four major highland regions dotted with a number of active volcanoes. The annals of astronomy tell us that twice in 1686 and 1833 bright lights were observed shining out of Venus's north and south poles. Then in 1978, a Pioneer 12 orbiting vehicle revealed holes in the atmosphere just above the north and south poles. A decade later, even more significant evidence was revealed when NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory released a series of radar generated photographs of the planet which pierced through the clouds, one of the images clearly showing a north polar opening. The picture had such an impact on the scientific community that it was published on the front cover of the April 1989 issue of Discovery magazine. Mars, the red planet, has probably excited more interest than any of the other worlds in the solar system, and certainly the most widespread speculation that it could contain life. The stories about its so-called canals are part of the scientific folklore, and books such as H.G. Wells' The War of the Worlds, 1898, have given it a unique place in speculative fiction with its erratic motion, white-capped poles, and dark blue-gray formations in a constant state of change. The chances of it being hollow are considered to be very high. Mars has a day almost identical to ours, although its atmosphere is much thinner and consists mostly of carbon dioxide. The temperatures are such as to prevent water existing for long as a liquid, changing directly from vapor to ice and back again. The U.S. astronomer Percival Lowell, 1855 to 1916, who first suggested there might be life on Mars as a result of observing the crisscrossing pattern of lines he identified as canals, was also the first to theorize that the planet might be hollow. He spotted through his telescope, quote, a dark circular band, end quote, appearing around the poles during the summer season, and the following spring noticed something even stranger. Quote, as I was watching the planet. I saw suddenly 2 points like stars flash out in the midst of the North Pole polar cap, dazzlingly white upon the duller white background of the snow. These stars shone brightly for a few moments and then slowly disappeared. End quote. Could these have been rays of light from a central sun inside Mars? A contemporary science writer, Martin Caidin, has also reported that in recent years several American and Russian astronomers have observed very bright flashes originating from both the north and south poles of Mars. Ernest L. Norman, an American scientific researcher of the paranormal, claims in his book The Truth About Mars, 1998, that not only is the planet hollow, but it is actually inhabited by a highly intelligent humanoid race. He writes, quote, on Mars, the cities are all underground, and as the outside temperature is very rare and of a low oxygen content, they are becoming less and less dependent on that source of air supply. Many thousands of years ago, the Martians learned how to obtain air from water by electrolysis. They are a quiet, peace-loving people who originally migrated there in a spacecraft from a dying planet and settled below the hostile surface. End quote. Phobos. Phobos is the closer to the planet of Mars' two moons, about 5,830 miles away, and a strong case has been made that it too is hollow inside. The little satellite, about 20 miles in diameter, has a unique orbit of just over 7 hours, which means that it travels around the planet twice in a Martian day. The moon's surface contains numerous grooves, up to 220 yards wide, and several craters, the largest of which has been named Stickney. All are believed to have resulted from the impact of missiles from space. Photographs of Phobos taken by the Viking spacecraft in the late 70s give it the eerie appearance of an alien craft in perpetual orbit around Mars. Jupiter. Jupiter is the largest planet in the solar system. 1,300 Earths would fit comfortably into its bulk, and the first of the four planets beyond the asteroid belt, which make up the Jovian group with Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. It is famous for its great red spot, a strange phenomenon big enough to hold two Earths, and is a mysterious world that has fascinated astronomers for generations. There was general amazement, however, in 1979 when Voyager 1 flew past Jupiter, revealing that the spot is actually a vortex piercing the planet's three distinctive zones of water, ammonium hydrosulfide, and ammonia, right down to the surface. This has prompted speculation that Jupiter could be, in fact, hollow, with at least one entranceway far more visible than those on Earth or any of the other planets. Voyager 1 also confirmed that Jupiter was probably originally formed from a swirling mass of dust and gas and can actually be compared to a gigantic bag of gases consisting of hydrogen and helium in vast shells thousands of miles thick. Just what lies at their heart is the real puzzle of Jupiter. Callisto, the moon of Jupiter, which first excited my interest in the possibility of other hollow worlds, is said by NASA scientists to be perhaps the only spot in the Jovian system upon which mankind might feasibly land at some time in the future. The farthest of Jupiter's four major Galilean satellites, named after Galileo, who discovered them in 1610, the other three are Io, Europa, and Ganymede. Callisto is about 3,000 miles in diameter and is believed to be covered by a soft ice mantle and a thick ice crust. It is It has probably more craters on its surface than any other moon or planet in the solar system, the result of being regularly bombarded by meteors throughout its entire existence. The most curious sight of all is a 378-mile wide crater at the heart of a series of concentric rings extending for at least 620 miles in all directions. Could this be an opening to the interior? Saturn is one of the wonders of the solar system with its unmistakable ring. It hangs in the heavens like a huge glowing ball with its cluster of satellites, orbiting leisurely around the Sun once every 29 years. For a long time, Saturn was mistakenly believed to be 3 planets, and it was not until 1659 that a Dutch astronomer, Christian Huygens, defined it as a single world, quote, surrounded by a thin flat ring which nowhere touches the body, end quote. It was Voyager 1 which provided the first close-up views of this romantic world, revealing that the ring system actually consists of 300 ringlets of solid particles of rock and ice. These do not gradually merge into one another as conventional theory would have it, but are separated by complicated gravitational interactions between the ring material and 6 of Saturn's 15 moons. Whether the rings were created at the same time as the planet, or are the remnants of a comet or moon that passed too close and was torn apart and swirled into orbit, remains a mystery. Saturn takes about 10 Earth hours to revolve and is flatter at the poles than most other planets in the solar system. The complexity of the ring has generated much speculation about the true nature of the planet, not forgetting the white oval spots on the surface, which the NASA spacecraft also photographed. The bands of lighter and darker clouds indicating equatorial and temperate belts are equally puzzling, although, once again, the fact that the planet consists of ice, hydrogen, and helium with a certain amount of liquefied rock has fueled speculation that it too may be hollow. Uranus, or Uranus, if you're bothered by the name. The blue-green disk on the far frontier of the solar system is the third largest body in the system, with a diameter 4 times that of Earth. It is not unlike Jupiter and Saturn and possesses a dense hydrogen atmosphere. Uranus has an extraordinary orbit with an axial tilt of 98 degrees relative to the plane of its orbit, which means that first one pole and then the other points directly at the sun during the course of its 84-year orbit. Both of these poles are noticeably flattened. In complete contrast, the planet rotates very quickly on its axis, turning once every 15 hours. Naturally, this results in the most bizarre seasons on Uranus, with long, intense periods of light and dark. A number of dark spots have been sighted on the surface, along with 2 rather dusky-looking poles, and these have prompted speculation that there may well be disturbances taking place inside the planet. 2 small, newly identified moons, both far distant from Uranus and as yet unnamed, have added to the planet's mystery. They were discovered in April 1998 by a team of astronomers led by Dr. Brett Gladman of the University of Toronto using cameras mounted on the 16-foot Hale telescope at Palomar Observatory. The pair have been added to the planet's known 5, Oberon, Titania, Ariel, Umbriel, and Miranda, and are said to be 40 and 80 miles in diameter, respectively, and unusually red in color. Initial observation of the moons by Dr. Gladman suggests they may have originated in the outer solar system and been captured by the gravitational pull of Uranus. Again, the similarity between these 2 curious bodies in Phobos and Callisto has led to speculation that they might also be hollow. It now seems evident to me that the farther we go into the depths of space, the stronger the possibility becomes that the Earth may be just one of many hollow worlds. Admittedly, this is a theory that the majority of scientists and astronomers regard with a good deal of skepticism. None of them, however, have managed to produce enough facts totally to disprove such an idea. There is one further concept that intrigues me as much as it does others who have studied the hollow Earth enigma. It is this: the search for intelligent life in the galaxy, in particular NASA's SETI program, has so far drawn a blank despite a great deal of scientific experimentation implementation, which included the dispatching of a number of probes into deepest space. Yet even so, we remain convinced that we are not, cannot be alone. So is the simple truth that we are looking in the wrong place? Is it possible that the Earth is the only planet on which life exists on the outside? Could it be that elsewhere in the galaxy, life forms have chosen to dwell inside their worlds, protected from harsh environments or the danger from space represented by meteors or comets that could destroy entire populations on impact? Even though we inhabit a world which enables life to flourish on the surface, can we really be certain this is the norm? The primary requirements for life anywhere is generally agreed to be a sun, and if one was created in the interior when a planet itself was being born, the situation would be half resolved. If this sun were in proportion to the subterranean world it had to light and heat, and did not have to send its rays across the enormity of space like our sun, the equation would surely be complete. As I have shown in the pages of this book, the concept of a paradise somewhere inside the earth has been an integral part of myth, folklore, and religion since time immemorial, and the significance of this is not beyond a rational explanation. One of the greatest challenges open to mankind must be the final resolution of this enigma. Is a whole new world awaiting us, as it has done for ages, not in the far reaches of space, but beneath our very feet? And that is the end of the last chapter. And then we have a one-page epilogue. Epilogue. In June 1998, a worldwide group of scientists announced the setting up of a cooperative project, Deep Earth Observations from the Seafloor, DEOS, to, quote, probe deep under the surface of the Earth to search for new life forms and answers to some of the planet's most enduring geological mysteries, end quote. The project will employ a global satellite network working in conjunction with a series of sea-floor observatories and detectors to look beneath the Earth's crust for the first time, with the aid of sound and electromagnetic waves that can travel through the planet. The team hopes to find evidence to show precisely what lies deep inside the planet. A leading member, John Orcutt, professor of geophysics at the University of California, said it was hoped the project would do for geologists what the Hubble Space Telescope was doing for astronomers, provide an unprecedented view into undiscovered regions. Quote, we have long needed a system like Hubble, Orcutt said, but to look inward, not out. This network will be critical for Earth sciences and will lead to new insights, end quote. Another senior scientist, Professor Bob Detrick of the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute in Massachusetts, added even more significantly, quote, the project will allow us to image the interior of the Earth with much greater precision and clarity so we can see how it affects the movements of the continents, the origins of volcanoes, and on a more local scale, the processes that generate earthquakes, end quote. At an even greater depth, it is hoped that DEOS, will give an accurate picture of the world's core. Quote, it is something that people have been wondering about for centuries, end quote, said Jeremy Bloxham, professor of geophysics at Harvard University and another key member of the team. Quote, I certainly think these seafloor observatories will help us to crack this complex problem, end quote. Is the 2,000-year-old South American prophecy about to be fulfilled? And that is that. That is the entire book. There are pictures in the very back. I didn't know that. What are these? What does it say these are? Plates. Okay, so we have some pictures to show. So I'll do that to finish out the session. So, the Earth, solid globe or hollow world with entrances at the north and south poles. And, of course, there is the picture that we have all seen many times. There would be Saudi Arabia right there in the Horn of Africa. Sir Edmund Halley with a sketch showing his concept of the hollow earth. So he's thinking that there are 3 shells total. Wow, he's got a messed up neck in that picture. It almost looks like the copy of the picture is like it stuttered, like when a printer kind of stutters and does a section multiple times. That's kind of what that looks like. So I would assume it's just a messed up picture. Marshall B. Gardner with there are 2 pictures. His idea of the North Pole polar opening, the planet's interior, and below the central sun as viewed by an explorer entering the hollow Earth. Okay. Well, I guess it is actually one picture. It's just um, or one plate. It's two pictures. So his idea of the opening and then the interior sun. Rear Admiral Richard E. Byrd, whose polar explorations led into the hollow Earth, uh, the upper picture, and then below, open water in the midst of the photo of something. Um, it cuts off. Photographed by Rear Admiral Byrd's navigator, Captain McKinley, I guess. Oh, okay. It's kind of weird. It rolls around to the next page. So, um, Rear Admiral Richard E. Byrd, whose polar explorations led him to fly into the hollow Earth, below open water in the midst of the Antarctic, photographed by Rear Admiral Byrd's navigator, Captain um, M. McKinley. Okay, now I got it. It's got some weird wrapping going on there. Sorry. So Byrd, open water in the Arctic or Antarctic. Next, Raymond Palmer, the American Magazine editor, who championed the hollow Earth theory, and below the 2 ESSA 3 satellite photographs of the North Pole opening taken in 1967, one clearly revealing the hole which he first published. Okay, there he is. There's the 2 photographs. There's the opening. Um, what's going on here? Okay, the Apollo 16 spacecraft view of the North Pole opening taken in 1972. Apollo, and that's the opening. It almost does look like a little bit like an iris opening, like you see in mostly sci-fi type stuff, or similar to a camera lens opening iris. Anyway, I don't know if this one's going to show up whole. Oh, it does. Okay, cool. So it is captioned, could these be the inhabitants of the hollow earth? The curious mummified figure was found in a cave deep below the Pedro Mountains in Wyoming in 1932. Okay, I'll read that other one. the rest of that here in a minute. But here is the mummified figure from Wyoming. It is odd. Okay. Then this other one says a 50s photograph of a humanoid from a UFO of the kind believed to originate from inside the world. A 50s photograph. Okay. Next, the photograph of Callisto, one of the moons of Jupiter, which sparked the author's interest in the possibility that other worlds might also be hollow. Still getting that weird wrapping kind of effect. So that's Callisto. I don't know that I've ever seen a picture of Callisto. Okay. John Cleves Sims was the first man to argue that the rings of Saturn indicated it was a hollow planet. And here is the picture. It's just a picture of the rings, which are cool. Don't get me wrong. I really do quite like them. Okay. Two Russian scientists, Mikhail and Alexandra Chicherbakov, have speculated that the moon is a hollow sphere. And we have a picture of one of the landers. Yeah, I'll just show you. One of the landers, big craters. Yeah. I've heard the stories about the moon being hollow from multiple sources. We'll get into some of them when we get into other books. Okay, so the next one is craters such as these on the surface of Mercury are believed to indicate that the planet is hollow. So, interesting, overlapping craters, but they don't get deeper, kind of like they talk about on the surface of the moon. Lots and lots of craters, but they're very shallow and very wide. One of the radar-generated photographs of Venus taken by a NASA spacecraft, which reveals a north polar opening. Okay, I don't see where they're getting the opening part from it, but okay. So, I mean, I see a dark area over here. I see kind of, darker areas there. I don't know. I don't know where they're getting that, but okay. American scientific researcher Ernest L. Norman believes that the interior of Mars is already inhabited by a race of peaceful aliens. And this would be a picture of Mars. Okay. We should be almost done with these. Phobos, one of the two moons of Mars, is said to be hollow, as well as bearing an uncanny resemblance to an alien spacecraft in orbit. Okay. Phobos. All right. If you say so. I think we're at the last two pictures here. Okay. So we've got the Great Red Spot on Jupiter, which the Voyager 1 spacecraft in 1979 revealed to be a vortex which may penetrate below the planet's surface. The Great Red Spot. Okay, and the final picture NASA's concept for a future world in space bears a striking similarity to the ancient idea of humanity living on the inside of a hollow Earth. Yeah, it does, actually. Um, I've seen similar things in many science fiction kind of things. Hey, Vesper, how you doing? We're just finishing up the last few pictures in the back of this book, and then we are done. Um, there's just a little bio on the author now, and a little thing about his another one of his books, The Lost World of Agarty, The Mystery of Vril Power, um, which could be an interesting read. So this book came out in 1999, which that explains a few things about how he um, was talking. Um, but anyway, yeah, that's it. We're done. The Hollow Earth Enigma is no more. We have finished it. Um, and I have found my copy of Plato the Republic, which is where I'm going to be taking off on Tuesday in the next reading for this stream. So we'll jump into that. And then I've got a whole list of stuff I'm trying to figure out what I want to read after the Republic, which the Republic is longer than I expected it to be. So it's going to be a few readings for sure. But it should be good. I'm looking forward to it. Um, but I've actually gotten more negative um, feedback from reading Plato than I have about reading anything else. But that's okay. I don't care. I'm still going to read it. So, all right. Yeah. You know what? I think I'm done. Because it was, what were some of the, um, they were saying, you know, why would somebody want to listen to a bad reading of primitive philosophy that everybody read in high school when they could just listen to um, like an AI reading of it or something? And it's like I don't like, and I just said, if you don't like what you're seeing, just scroll on. And that was actually stuff I got after uploading it to YouTube, because all of my videos go to YouTube, and I got those. Everyone read in high school. Are they some upper middle class private school kid? I don't know. I don't. I think they were just a troll, and I just blocked them. Like, if you don't want to see it, you could just as easily scroll on, but I can also, in a couple of clicks, just bar you from seeing it. So that's what I did. Um, I don't generally want to ban people, um, but in that case, it's just like, if you want to be critical of how I read or what I read or whatever, go for it. But if you're just going to come in and troll, that's when you get banned. Yeah. And probably they've never read it before and they didn't understand it. So, anyway, um, I am done for the night. I think I'm not going to raid anybody. I'm just going to head on out. Um, so, I thank you for coming in. I hope everybody has enjoyed the book, whether they believe it or not. It's still entertainment. I'm getting some good feedback on it on YouTube. People are enjoying it. Um, so, yeah, we'll move on to Republic next. So, you all have a good night, and I'll see you on Tuesday.
in shattered skies, watching teary blue eyes, wonder where I might find some peace of mind. Not lights like I had, but more sophisticated into love relations. I'm disassembling my own heart, 'cause my mind's a million places and giving up. So it's in my head. So tell me it's not happening. Tell me it's not happening. Surrender myself. I feel the world collapsing, but not lights like I had, but more sophisticated into love relations. Now disassembling my own heart, 'cause my mind's a million places and giving up. So it's in my head. So tell